Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey there, Herman and Corin. So I am a big fan of Zulu time, or Universal Coordinated Time. I'm looking currently actually at a rain forecast here in Jerusalem, and I see that the time is denominated in Zulu, or UTC, Z or UTC. So I always like to have Zulu time on my clocks as well as the local time, because I think there's something quite amazing about the fact that if you know Zulu time and you know the current offset against UTC, you can tell the time anywhere on the planet. It's very much used in aviation, meteorology. Computer logs are often written in Zulu, and I guess probably a few other fields. I'd love to know a few things, a few common points of confusion, I guess. We have, of course, daylight savings time in different parts of the world. So the offset against Zulu is not going to be the same, is generally not the same throughout the calendar year. I'm not aware of any exceptions to that rule, actually. But then sometimes people will say, oh, you mean Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT. I know it's a little bit maybe venturing into the realm of pedantry and splitting hairs here, but as far as I'm aware, GMT is a time zone. UTC, to say that UTC is the same as GMT, I don't think is accurate. But I'd love to get your clarification on that topic. Clearly, knowing the time anywhere in the world is a bigger deal than maybe it was in the past, with it being now quite commonplace to work across time zones. But Zulu seems to really have stood the test of time as being the closest thing we have to a globally agreeable benchmark for what the time is anywhere. So how did it come about? And besides the groups that I mentioned, who uses it? And are there other people, crazies like me, that like to have UTC somewhere on their desktop? Let's talk about Universal Coordinated Time, or Zulu time, in today's episode.
It is a rainy afternoon here in Jerusalem, and I was just looking out the window, thinking about how the weather does not really care what time our clocks say. It just does its thing. But for us humans, keeping track of when that rain is going to hit is a massive exercise in coordination. Welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn, and I am sitting here with my brother, who I suspect has at least 3 different time zones memorized at any given moment.
Herman Poppleberry here, and you are absolutely right, Corn. I actually have a world clock widget on my desktop that shows 4 different zones, but the one at the very top, the one that never changes, is UTC. Our housemate Daniel sent us a great prompt today about this exact thing. He was looking at a rain forecast earlier and noticed it was denominated in Zulu time, or Coordinated Universal Time. He wants to know where it came from, why we use it, and if it is actually different from Greenwich Mean Time.
It is a classic Daniel question. He has that eye for the systems running in the background of our lives, and Zulu time is definitely one of those invisible foundations. It is funny because we usually think of time as something local. It is noon because the sun is overhead. But in a connected world, local time is almost a liability in some industries.
Exactly. If you are a pilot flying from Tokyo to Los Angeles, you are crossing the international date line and multiple time zones. If you tried to coordinate your flight plan using local times, the math would be a nightmare. You would be constantly adding and subtracting hours just to figure out when you are supposed to land. Zulu time provides that single, unwavering heartbeat that the whole world can sync to.
So let us start with the name. Why Zulu? It sounds a bit mysterious, or maybe like a military code.
It is a military code, in a way. It comes from the nautical and military tradition of dividing the world into 24 primary time zones, each roughly 15 degrees of longitude wide. Each zone was assigned a letter of the alphabet, skipping J. The zone centered on the prime meridian, which runs through Greenwich, England, is the zero offset zone and is designated by the letter Z. In the phonetic alphabet used by the military and aviation, the letter Z is spoken as Zulu, so Z times 0 offset time became Zulu time. When you see a timestamp ending in a capital Z, like 1400Z, that is the world telling you to look at the master clock.
That makes sense. It is a lot punchier than saying Coordinated Universal Time every time you want to check a log. But that brings up the acronym itself. Why is it UTC? If it is Coordinated Universal Time, should it not be CUT? Or if it is the French version, Temps Universal Coordonnées, should it not be TUC?
You have hit on a classic bit of international compromise, Corn. Back when they were standardizing this, the English speakers wanted CUT and the French speakers wanted TUC. To avoid favoring one language over the other, international bodies like the International Telecommunication Union and the International Astronomical Union settled on UTC. It is technically not an acronym for anything in any language, but it fits the pattern of other related timescales like UTO and UT1.
I love that. Even our global time standard is the result of a linguistic standoff. Now, Daniel mentioned a common point of confusion, which is the difference between UTC and Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT. Most people use them interchangeably, but Daniel suspects there is some pedantry involved in the distinction. Is he right?
He is absolutely right. For most casual conversations, they are the same thing. They both represent the time at the prime meridian. But scientifically and technically, they are very different. GMT is a time zone. It is a historical standard based on the rotation of the Earth. Astronomers used to measure it by when the sun crossed the meridian at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich.
But the Earth's rotation is not perfectly consistent, right? It wobbles and slows down.
Precisely. The Earth is a bit of a messy clock. It is affected by tides, the movement of the Earth's core, and even large earthquakes. So, GMT is an astronomical time. UTC, on the other hand, is an atomic time scale. It is derived from an ensemble of several hundred atomic clocks around the world. These clocks measure the vibrations of cesium atoms, which are incredibly stable, and their readings are combined by the International Bureau of Weights and Measures to form International Atomic Time and then UTC.
So UTC is the high-precision version. It is like the digital master clock, while GMT is more of a traditional, sun-based reference.
Right. And because the Earth's rotation is slowing down, UTC actually has to be adjusted occasionally to stay in sync with Earth's day. That is where leap seconds come in. We add a second to UTC every now and then, so that when the sun is directly over Greenwich, UTC still says it is 12 noon to within about a second. Though, interestingly, in 2022, the General Conference on Weights and Measures voted to phase out leap seconds in UTC by around 2035 because they cause too many headaches for computer systems. The plan is to let the difference between atomic time and the Earth's rotation grow a bit larger before we ever bother adjusting it again.
We actually touched on some of the complexities of global standards back in episode 2064 when we talked about mainframes. Those old systems are often the ones most sensitive to these tiny shifts in timekeeping. But let us get into who actually uses Zulu time today. Daniel mentioned aviation and meteorology. Why is it so critical for them?
In meteorology, it is about the when of the data. If you have weather stations all over the globe taking measurements, you need them to take those measurements at the exact same moment. If a station in New York takes a pressure reading at 8 in the morning local time, and a station in London takes one at 8 in the morning local time, those readings are 5 hours apart. You cannot build an accurate global weather model with staggered data. So, every major weather observation in the world is recorded in UTC.
That is why Daniel saw it on the rain forecast. The model was likely generated using data points all synced to that Zulu clock. And I imagine it is the same for aviation. If two planes are approaching the same airspace, there cannot be any ambiguity about what time they will be there.
Exactly. Air traffic control is a giant, high-stakes game of synchronization. Every flight plan and weather briefing uses Zulu time. If you look at a MEDAR report, that is the standard coded weather report for pilots, the timestamp is always in Zulu. For example, if you see 08-1730Z, that means the observation was taken on the 8th day of the month at 1730 Zulu. It eliminates the wait, is that your time or my time conversation, which is the last thing you want to be having when you are traveling at 500 miles per hour.
It is also huge in computing. If you have ever looked at server logs, they are almost always in UTC. If you are trying to debug a system where a user in Sydney is interacting with a server in Virginia, and you are looking at the logs from a headquarters in London, trying to piece together the sequence of events using 3 different local times would be a nightmare.
Oh, it is more than a nightmare. It is a recipe for data corruption. Most modern databases store all their timestamps in UTC and then only convert to local time when they are displaying that data to a human. This is especially important for things like financial transactions. If you are trading stocks globally, the sequence of who bought what and when has to be absolute. You cannot have a situation where a trade appears to happen before the order was placed because of a time zone offset.
And then there is the giant headache that Daniel mentioned, daylight savings time. This is where local time really falls apart for technical work.
Don't even get me started on daylight savings. It is the bane of every programmer's existence. In the United States, for example, we spring forward and fall back. That means one day a year has 23 hours and another day has 25 hours. If you are running a scheduled task that is supposed to happen at 2:30 in the morning, what happens when 2:30 in the morning literally does not exist because the clock jumped from 2 to 3?
Or worse, what happens when 2:30 happens twice because the clock fell back from 3 to 2? You might end up charging a customer twice or sending out duplicate notifications.
Exactly. UTC does not have daylight savings. It does not care about politics or farming schedules or trying to get more sunlight in the evening. It is perfectly linear in its design. 1 second follows another, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a civil day as UTC is defined. Using UTC as your benchmark means you never have to worry about the missing hour or the extra hour.
It is a bit like a mathematical constant for time. It is the anchor. But what about the history? How did we get to a point where the whole world agreed on a single 0 point in Greenwich? It was not always that way.
Not at all. Before the mid-19th century, time was purely local. Every town had its own noon based on the sun. If you traveled 20 miles west, your clock would be a few minutes off from the town you just left. This worked fine when people moved at the speed of a horse, but then the railways came along.
Right. The railway time problem. If you're trying to publish a train schedule, you cannot have every station on the line using a different local time. You would never know when the train was actually arriving.
Precisely. The British Railways were among the first to standardize, and they chose Greenwich time because that is what the Royal Observatory used for navigation. Then, in 1884, there was the International Meridian Conference in Washington, D.C. 25 nations gathered to decide on a single prime meridian for the whole world.
Was Greenwich the obvious choice?
It was the most popular choice because about 70% of the world's shipping already used charts based on Greenwich. But it was not unanimous. France, for example, abstained from the vote. They wanted a neutral meridian, maybe something in the Atlantic or even a meridian through Paris. It took decades for everyone to fully get on board. Much later, in the mid-20th century, as atomic clocks became practical, international organizations defined new atomic time scales, first International Atomic Time, then Coordinated Universal Time, using Greenwich as the longitudinal reference but basing the seconds on atomic physics instead of Earth's rotation.
It is fascinating how much of our modern world is built on these 19th century decisions, and how later atomic time decisions layered on top. We are still using the Greenwich Meridian as our 0 point in 2026, even though the technology we use to measure time has moved from mechanical clocks to vibrating atoms.
It really is. And to Dania's point about people using it personally, I think it is becoming more common. If you work in a global company, or if you are a digital nomad, or even just a gamer who plays with people all over the world, you start to develop a UTC sense. You stop thinking, what time is it in San Francisco, and start thinking, what is the offset from UTC?
I have noticed that too. It is like a mental map. I know that here in Jerusalem we are usually UTC +2 or UTC +3 during the summer. If I have a meeting with someone in New York, I know they are UTC -5 or -4 when they are on summertime. If I just keep the UTC time in my head, the math becomes much simpler.
It also helps with that feeling of time zone jet lag you get when you are working remotely. If you are always checking your local clock, you are constantly reminded of how late or early it is for you. But if you look at a Zulu clock, it feels more objective. It is just the time of the world.
I wonder if we will ever reach a point where we just get rid of local time zones entirely. There have been proposals for a universal time where everyone on Earth uses the same clock. So, if it is 12 noon in London, it is 12 noon in Tokyo and 12 noon in New York.
That would be a massive cultural shift. Can you imagine the confusion? In New York, you would be going to work at maybe 1300 and eating dinner at 1 or 2 in the morning. People are very attached to the idea that 12 means the sun is high.
True, but we already do that with other things. We do not have local units for weight or distance anymore, for the most part. We have standardized on the metric system in most of the world. Time is the last holdout of localized measurement.
It is a holdout because it is tied to our biological rhythms. Our circadian clocks are set by the sun, but as we move more of our lives into digital spaces, that sun-based rhythm becomes less relevant. In a virtual office, the sun does not matter. The only thing that matters is that we all show up at the same moment.
That is a great point. The moment is universal, even if the hour is local. Zulu time is essentially the clock of the internet. It is the time of the machines.
And it is also the time of space. If you look at the International Space Station, they use UTC. When you are orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, you see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. Local time has no meaning up there, so they sync to the heartbeat of the home planet, which is UTC.
That is a perfect analogy. It is the heartbeat. Now, Daniel asked about points of confusion. We have talked about GMT versus UTC and the daylight savings mess. Are there any other traps people fall into when they start using Zulu time?
One big one is the date change. Because UTC does not care about your local midnight, the date can change for the world while it is still yesterday for you. If you are in Los Angeles and it is 8 in the evening on a Monday, it is already 4 in the morning on Tuesday in Zulu time. If you are looking at a computer log or a flight schedule, you have to be very careful that you are looking at the right day.
I have made that mistake before. You see a Tuesday timestamp and you think you have missed a deadline, but then you realize it is just the Zulu clock getting ahead of your local sunset.
Another one is the offset itself. People often forget if they should add or subtract. A simple trick is to remember that the sun moves east to west. So, if you are east of Greenwich, like we are in Jerusalem, you are ahead of UTC. You add hours. If you are west of Greenwich, like in New York, you are behind UTC. You subtract hours.
It sounds simple when you say it, but in the heat of a project, I can see how it gets muddled. Especially when you throw in the fact that different countries change their daylight savings on different dates. The offset between London and New York is not even constant throughout the year.
Exactly. There is a 2 or 3 week window every year where the United States has shifted, but the United Kingdom has not, or vice versa. During that time, the difference is 4 hours instead of 5. If you rely on UTC, you see that shift clearly. If you just rely on what is the time in London, you can get caught out.
So, for someone like Daniel, or any of our listeners who want to start using Zulu time as their personal benchmark, what is the best way to get started?
I would say the first step is to add a UTC clock to your phone or your computer desktop. Most operating systems let you have multiple clocks. Put it right there next to your local time. Do not try to do the math in your head at first, just look at it.
And maybe start using it for things that are not strictly local. If you are setting a reminder for a meeting with someone in another zone, write it down in UTC. Meeting at 1400 Zulu. It forces your brain to treat it as the real time, and the local time as just a translation.
I actually use a 24-hour clock for everything now, which helps a lot. Zulu time is always 24 hours. There is no AM or PM in the world of aviation or computing. It is just 0 to 2359. Once you get used to 24-hour time, the Zulu transition is much easier.
It is also worth looking into Unix time if you are a real nerd like Herman here. We talked about this briefly in episode 1088 when we were discussing Big Tech's approach to AI. Unix time is basically the number of seconds that have passed since January 1st, 1970, counted in UTC.
Oh, Unix time is beautiful. It is just one big, ever-increasing integer counting seconds since that epoch. By design, each Unix day is treated as exactly 86,400 seconds, so it ignores leap seconds. No months, no named days in the core representation, just seconds. It is one of the cleanest ways computers use to represent the passage of time, and then we map that to human calendars with all the messy stuff like leap years and months with 31 days.
Though it does have its own Y2K-style problem coming up, does it not? The year 2038 problem. We are only about 12 years away from that now.
Yes, for older 32-bit systems where the time counter is stored as a signed 32-bit integer, the number of seconds will eventually get too big to store, and the clock will overflow in January 2038 and wrap around to a date in December 1901. But most modern systems are 64-bit now, which means they won't have a similar overflow problem for roughly 290 billion years. I think we will be okay.
290 billion years. I think I can clear my schedule for that. But bringing it back to the present, or at least to January 2026, it is clear that Zulu time is more than just a convenience for pilots. It is a way of thinking about our place in a globalized world.
It really is. It is about recognizing that while our daily lives are local, our impact and our connections are global. When I see that Zulu clock, I am reminded that somewhere in the world, someone is just starting their day, someone is right in the middle of a shift, and someone is winding down, all at this exact same moment.
It is a unifying force. It is one of the few things the entire planet has actually agreed on. We might disagree on politics, religion, and even which side of the road to drive on, but we all agree on what time it is at the prime meridian.
Well, mostly. There are still a few quirks. Did you know that some countries have time zones that are offset by 30 or even 45 minutes? India is UTC plus 530. Nepal is UTC plus 545.
45 minutes? That seems intentionally difficult.
It is actually a point of national identity. Nepal chose that offset in 1986 to align with a meridian near the center of the country and to distinguish itself from India's time zone. But it also conveniently differentiates them from India's time zone. Even so, they still use UTC as their base. They just add 5 hours and 45 minutes to it.
It is the anchor that holds the whole messy system together. I think the practical takeaway here is that even if you are not a pilot or a meteorologist, understanding UTC gives you a better operating system for the modern world. It removes the ambiguity.
Definitely. And it is just cool. There is something very satisfying about knowing the true time. When Daniel looks at his rain forecast and sees 1200 Zulu, he is seeing the same number that a pilot over the Atlantic is seeing and a scientist in Antarctica is seeing.
It makes the world feel a little smaller, in a good way. So, to wrap up Daniel's prompt, Zulu time grew out of the need to standardize time for global coordination, especially in navigation, railways, and later telecommunications and computing. It is maintained by the incredible precision of atomic clocks, and while it is technically different from GMT, they serve the same purpose for most of us. And yes, there are plenty of time nerds out there who use it to keep their lives in sync.
If you are one of those people who has a UTC clock on your desk, or if this episode made you want to add one, we would love to hear about it. Or if you have another deep dive question about the systems that run our world, send it our way.
You can find us on Spotify and at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We're closing in on episode 300, which is a pretty wild milestone.
It really is. We have come a long way since those early discussions about emergent behaviors and global standards. And hey, if you have been listening for a while and you're enjoying the show, it would mean a lot to us if you could leave a quick review on your podcast app. It genuinely helps other curious people find us.
A huge thanks to Daniel for the prompt today. It is always fun to pull back the curtain on something we take for granted, like the time on our clocks. I think I'm going to go set a UTC clock on my phone right now.
Welcome to the club, Corn. You will be thinking in 24 hours Zulu time before the week is out.
We will see about that. Thanks for listening to my weird prompts. I am Corn.
And I am Herman Poppleberry.
We will talk to you next time.
Until then, stay curious.
So, Herman, if it is currently 1600 Zulu, and I want to have dinner at 7 p.m. local time, wait, do not tell me. Let me do the math.
I will give you a hint. We are in wintertime here in Jerusalem, so we are UTC plus 2.
Okay, so 1600 plus 2 is 1800. That is 6 p.m., so dinner is in exactly 1 hour.
Spot on. See? You are already a pro.
I am not sure if pro is the word, but I am definitely hungry. Let us go see what is in the kitchen.
I think it is Daniel's turn to cook. I hope he has synchronized his kitchen timer to Zulu time.
As long as the food is ready at 1900 local, I do not care what the timer says.
Fair enough. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Wait, one last thing. Did you know that the word second comes from the fact that it is the second division of an hour? The first division being the minute?
I did not know that, but I am not surprised you did.
I have 1,000,000 of these. Corn. 1,000,000.
I believe it. All right, let us get that dinner.
Onward to the kitchen.
Seriously, though, the 45-minute offset in Nepal is fascinating. I wonder if they have special watches for that.
They actually do. Some mechanical watches have a second crown just for adjusting those fractional time zones. It is a whole subgenre of horology.
Of course it is. We will have to save that for another episode.
Episode 305, The Horology of the Himalayas.
Do not tempt me.
It is a good title. You have to admit it is a good title.
It is a great title. Now move. I am starving.
Synchronizing hunger levels now.
You are ridiculous.
Guilty as charged. Let us go.
This has been my weird prompts. Thanks for sticking with us through the credits.
We really appreciate it. See you next week.
Bye. Seriously, Herman, 45 minutes?
It is true. Look it up.
I will. Right after dinner.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.